Okay, I guess that's the beginning of the panel then. So, thank you all for joining today. Thank you for the panelists for joining as well. And thank you everyone for viewing. Hope everyone is safe and well. Today we'll be talking about the do's and don'ts when it comes to securing investment during this crazy time that we're living in right now. So, just a bit of welcome and intros. First of all, I'd just like to go around the panel. If everyone, maybe starting in Mitsu, because you're on my top right, can you briefly tell us who you are, what your department or organization does in relation to creating new original IP?
Yeah, hi everyone. My name is Mitsu, and I work for the Regular Corporation. We are a publisher based in the UK as part of the larger group called the Tonic Games Group, including Mediatonic and Fortitude. We specialize in obviously publishing games specifically in the simulation and management category. And I work in biz dev, so I usually do all the industry events such as this and do any strategic partnership discussion. Really glad to be here today.
Thank you very much. And Ryan?
So my name is Ryan. I work in business development at an agency called Studio Capital Management. So we work with developers to help them grow their business. That often includes helping them find publishers for their new IP. Also work for hire, but really we work sort of end to end. So everything from helping them understand the market to come up with the right next concept, to preparing pitch materials, finding the right publisher and getting a deal, and then making sure that they're able to sort of, finish their game and get it to market.
Okay, and it looks like we've just lost Fernando. Fernando is the CEO of Modern Wolf. Oh, there you go. You're back. Here we go. Fernando, you can introduce yourself.
Hello, I'm very dramatically entering as Fernando Rizzo, the CEO of Modern Wolf, as Bobby just said. We're a newer game publisher. We launched last year. We're based in London. We publish strategy and strategy adjacent games. We fund development and are just kind of always on the lookout for cool and weird games to publish. And I'm big fan of Irregular Corp, big fan of SEGA, so really happy to be here with these awesome guys.
Cool, thank you, Fernando. So, and I'll introduce myself. I'm Bobby. I'm with SEGA. Within SEGA, there's a team called Searchlight, and that's the team that I'm in. And Searchlight is the incubation arm of SEGA. So what we look to do is partner with external studios and fully fund the project, publish it globally, or do M&A or investment into equity. Either way, it always leads into M&A. That's our end game for all the investments that we do. And I essentially act as the scout for SEGA. So yeah, it's great to have the kind of mix of publishers and an SEM, who's an agent representing developers and really quality developers. So actually, I think we'll be able to get some really good insight from everyone today. So a bit more context. Generally speaking, just so that people can differentiate maybe even, what kind of games do you look for? What do you look for in a studio? Is it platforms? Is it business models? Is it licenses? What is it that gets you excited? Shall we start with Fernando?
Sure. I think what gets me excited is unusual games. It's games that have a quality that we call durability or forever games. So one of the things that I think is really exciting about kind of the modern indie scene is things like modding, things like being able to, creating a kind of system-driven game that can be expanded over time and create a fresh experience that people keep coming back to. Discoverability is hard. I don't think anybody watching this talk is going to be surprised by that. Discoverability is hard. And creating a game that's sticky and that folks kind of stick with long term is kind of one great answer to discoverability, because you're ideally, creating evangelists for the game by making something that's fun for a long time. So to us, that's the big thing. On the business side, there's a whole host of things that we look for, but all of that is kind of sort of secondary to that one razor for us.
And what is it that people need to double down on to communicate that to you, to say, my game is sticky, it is different, it's going to be helpful with discoverability.
Yeah, I mean, it's understanding your game as a commercial proposition, right? Lots of folks lots of indie devs are making passion projects, and that's great. Indie dev is kind of the new sort of modding, like, bedroom coders used to make like Quake mods, and now things like Unity have made development so accessible, and now people make games. And if you're making a passion project game, and the audience for it is you, that's amazing. But if you want somebody else's money to help you finish it, you need to understand kind of what is the commercial proposition here, right? What audience is this game for? What perceived problems and gaps in the market am I trying to address with this game? That's a great start, right? If you could sit down, because we'll help you discover some of that stuff, and I'm sure everybody on this call, works with the devs they talk to help kind of refine that picture. But you've got to meet me part way and kind of show up with some basic understanding of what it is you're trying to do commercially.
Definitely. Thank you. Yeah. And Ryan?
Yeah, I mean, obviously we work with a number of different developers, but we look for a lot of the same things. So for us, we certainly look at, the team's experience. But in the case where, a lot of the clients that we work with, especially when we first start working with them, they might have a concept that they want to take to market. And, to sort of echo Fernando's points, we look at, the viability of the product, and is it something that gamers would want? Is it something that publishers are looking for? And one of the things that we often see is this sort of maybe misalignment between the concept and the idea and then the ask. So what are they looking for from a publisher? Not only in terms of the financial aspect, which can sometimes be sort of a little bit off what they probably need to sort of actually achieve their vision, but it's also what other things do you need from a publisher? So, do you need marketing support? Do you need extra QA support? Do you need, other guidance, other expertise, any technology they might have? So a lot of sort of what we look for when we're looking at, some of the clients we work with are like, how clear is that vision? How clear is that vision for the game, for their company, for their studio? Where do they want to take it? And then we make sure that they are articulating that in a way that makes sense, and I think Fernando's like dead on when he's talking about, that it's one thing if you're making something because you're passionate about it, but it's another thing if that also needs to intersect with something that's commercially viable. And that's a piece that we often really sort of see developers maybe not thinking about as much, right? It's like, why should this game get made? Like, why is there a market opportunity for this game? And so one of the things that we do is really help them try to flesh that out based on our understanding of the market, because we talk to all sorts of publishers like you guys.
And Mitsu?
Yeah, I think me personally, I look for a game that feels fresh enough. I don't ask for something that's too unique, because it's generally very, very difficult to produce something so unique that is commercially viable, because you end up making some kind of, quirky game that nobody really likes to buy, right? But so for example, in our company, we love simulation games. We love management games. We like tycoon games. We like building, and creativity. So, but there must be a combination of these elements that would give you, an experience that feels different enough that allows me to, fly the flag for them and promote the game. And, that excitement is, something it's very difficult to achieve, but good publishers or investors should be able to, like Ryan says, to actually work that up, and identify what the mojo is. I rarely meet developer whose first pitch is like perfect. Even ex AAA developers they'll say, "Oh, we've got 20 years experience," and you know what? Their pitch and everything is always never perfect. In fact, I've never met anybody pitches perfect. Their financials are perfect. It's always not perfect, right? But there must be something in the first meeting that takes your interest. You think it could be like an intrigue, could be exciting. You see like a gap in the market. So, like as an example, in our company we have a franchise called PC Building Simulator. You just make PCs, right? So in a way, no one's done it. No one did that, right? Game previously, but you just think there is a market there. People who love PCs in general, people use PC for work, for gaming, for all sorts of reasons. So we knew that the interest was already there. It's a novel idea, but the game cannot be made on their own. It actually came from a 15-year-old boy in Romania.
God, is that right?
Yeah. So, so we ended up adding 20 developers from Mediatonic side and, quite a lot of other people from the publishing side who actually realized that the developer's dream, getting official licenses, actually making the game right, and all sorts of reasons. And obviously, we had, the developer, he didn't even have a passport, right? And he couldn't travel to London to sign the contract, so he came with his mom, and
oh my God,
that's amazing.
Yeah, so
Mitsu, that is a freaking great story.
So identifying the gap, right, is I think the ultimate goal for every publisher. You're looking for the next big thing, I guess. But for me, I think that's quite a rare, random thing that only occurs once in a lifetime, right? So I always look for a combination of features or style of gameplay that produces something, feels a bit fresh. That's kind of what excites me a lot.
Yeah, that is. I mean, to attempt to put an even finer point on what Mitsu's saying, we are at the end of the day looking for something unusual. I think everybody, right? Because I don't think I'm being controversial here. If I go back, just saying discoverability is the challenge. It's the thing every publisher marketing department wakes up thinking about and goes to bed thinking about. And the only way to stand out is to have a unique sell, a unique look, a unique gameplay mechanic, right? And if you don't have that, then
you've got nothing to hang your hat on. I mean, it's just there's no reason for it to exist, right? It's just the same as another game.
Yeah.
So the other game was there first as well, and it's already got a community. So yeah, maybe. Okay, so for me, what type of games am I looking for? PC, console, something really different that stands out, something that can really own a space. For me, it's really important that I can believe in the vision, that it's going to be substantial, rather than a flash in the pan. I do want it to have longevity. I do want it to be the kind of game that I can see people continuing to want to invest loads of hours into. I'm not into like AR, VR, mobile, free-to-play stuff at the moment. But yeah, that's the kind of stuff that I look for. And then in terms of selection criteria, when evaluating a new pitch, what should people be highlighting in their pitch? So this is kind of what I was kind of digging into as Fernando earlier, but maybe I'll go first on this one. So in terms of the criteria that I look for is 3 big categories. Are they talented? Do they have credibility? Do they have a strong leadership team? Do they have proven experience? Do I believe they can deliver this vision? And then the next thing is product. Is the game super strong, right? Can I see it owning a space? Has it got games as a service potential? Do I see it turning into a franchise? And then finally, acquisition. Are they open to acquisition in the long term? Maybe it's not today, but maybe in a few years' time after working with Sega, they feel open to it. If they're not open to it, it makes it really tricky for me to sign games. So that's kind of like my key criteria is talent, product, acquisition, with talent coming first, I think, and then the product will naturally come if you've got the talent, right? It's the way that I look at it. Maybe Ryan, do you want to go first this time from the group?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I think like when we work with clients and look at their pitches and help them put them together, I mean, it essentially answers a lot of the same sort of questions. And I usually think of it in a few buckets as well. For me, it's always about asking the why question. So it's, why does this game need to exist? Like, why will people want to play this game? Then it's, why are you the team to make this game? So do you have the capability? Is there something in your pedigree or your experience that you're leveraging to make this game? And then why is the partner you're talking to, like, why should they be interested? And why are they the right partner for you to work with on this game? And really answering those few questions and making sure that your pitch answers those questions very clearly. Because I think at least that way, sort of to your point, is sort of, if you're answering here's why we think that this game is viable and why we're the team to make it, of course there's going to be things that you're going to refine over time. I mean, as we've said, no pitch is perfect. No pitch is just going to be like, yep, green light, go make exactly that game done. But at least if you're answering those questions, then it's kind of justifying all of the decisions that you're making behind the product, the team, and the partner that you're talking to.
Super cool. Who else go next? I'm taking your fingers up, your hands, Fernando, and your hands up in the
air. Yeah, no, I'm surprised. Fernando wanted to talk. Yeah, look, what we're looking for. So I think what's interesting is kind of the sort of diversity of sort of partners here in the panel, because Sega, obviously, if you end up working with Sega and Sega's like, listen, you need to have a path to be acquired by Sega. Man, if I had an indie developer and I was like, man, I'm going to get bought by Sega, that would be amazing. But we're not, Modern Wolf is not, we're not going to acquire you at the end of it. We're very different, infinitely smaller company than Sega. We are, the things that we're sort of internally evaluating, using to evaluate games, right, are a lot like what Bobby said, like, do we think the team can deliver the game? We tend to be really skeptical about people's first games. So we probably wouldn't have signed a PC building simulator made by the 15-year-old boy in Romania, right? Because that's obviously an enormous success, and we have definitely passed on pitches that we're like, that game is going to be a commercial success, but it's not right for us. So is it a game that fits our catalog, right? Is it a forever game? Is it a strategy or a strategy adjacent game? Is it a game where we can meaningfully help make this game better, right? Because some publishers are very hands-off and just kind of let you get on with it and call you once a month to see how it's going. We are much more hands-on, and we tend to talk to our devs every week. Our devs are in our Slack with us. We spend a lot of time talking with them, giving them feedback. Our devs have final creative say over their projects, but we give a lot of advice and feedback, right? And we sign games that we like, and we sign games that we're excited about. And if we don't think that we can meaningfully make the game better, we don't sign it. So because of that, we end up saying no to lots of great stuff. And I think everybody here would agree. Like, you say no to great games every week, right? Because it's not enough for a game to be amazing and have great potential. It also kind of has to fit the strategy that I'm aiming for. Otherwise, we would just sign everything and there would be no strategy, right? So if you're pitching publishers, and I was a dev once, and I went to Gamescom and pitched 50 publishers over 3 days and was mortified by all the no's I got, and you shouldn't take that badly, right? Like, if you're a dev and you're going to Gamescom or you're going to PAX or GDC with your pitch under your arm and you get 50 no's, that is, like, don't take that badly. And there's definitely, we're going to get into this later in the panel, I think, but there's definitely opportunities to repitch people. There's definitely opportunities to come back to people. And, we say no to good games all the time. So just because you get a no from Modern Wolf or from SEGA Searchlight or Tick, doesn't mean your game's bad, and it doesn't mean your game's not going to succeed. If you believe in it, that's the important thing. And you got to.
It is so true. I say no to games that I'm just like, I know this game is amazing, but it's just not right for me, right? Like for all the reasons that you've listed. So true.
Yeah, exactly. And that's partly why, we sort of try to make sure the developers keep in mind, like, why are you talking to this partner? Like, why do you think that this partner is a good fit for your game? Articulate the reasons that you're in front of them and that you're presenting your game to them.
I think Mitsu, did he talk to your selection criteria? No.
Yeah, I mean, for me, like, design is king. No developers are perfect. They might have a great idea, but the studio leadership is a bit of a douchebag. There's always things that goes against your. But design is king for me, and if I really believe in the design, I will try and make it work. I would try and corral together co-dev partners to give them more experience. Internally, we have design directors, technical directors. We've got, obviously we're part of Tonic Games Group, so we've got over like 300 developers who could help, right? So, we would try and prioritize, the design because that should be the priority. But obviously, everything else, has to be put on balance. This whole financial planning side, deliverability, all those things that we talked about, is really important. Obviously, I think I last counted, there are about 600 or 700 publishers in the world right now looking for content.
Jeez.
Right? There's quite a lot of us, right? There's a lot of competition. So, yes, if your game is good, you will be found somehow. There are lots of scouts like us hovering around the internet, scouring through Twitter and Reddit and all these darkest of forums looking for that next big thing.
Yes.
So, if you are active in the social media, somebody will find you. They will. There are eyes everywhere, right? So I wouldn't worry too much about it. But also, one of the big thing that we're quite keen on is what Fernando mentioned and Ryan mentioned about what the developer wants from us, because on a scale of support that publishers provide, Every Corporation is in the maximum extreme. For every project, we allocate about 8 to 9 people for every project. Because we're basically really, really want to make sure that the quality is there and, the discoverability, marketing, community managing, everything is is there. Because, we want to make sure all the product gets the same amount of love and attention. A lot of big publishers tends to focus on the kind of 2 or 3 kind of tentpole, the cash cow titles that they've got, and the smaller titles tend to get overlooked. So I don't think that's right. So every project we sign will get equal amount of people allocated, and we support them from day one all the way through. So I think it's important for developers to understand there are so many flavors of publishers in the world, and they need to choose how much they're comfortable with working with. If they want a hands-off, publisher, there are investors and hands-off publishers. But if they do want the help, if they are receptive to being helped, not managed and controlled, but helped by experienced publishers, then there are different flavors. So, and also, if you have like a €100,000 project, they shouldn't be going to Bobby, because Bobby's only looking for much bigger title, right? Because they're bigger publishers. So I think they need to really, really be careful. Do some, bit of research before you approach people, because as soon as I get a meeting request about mobile titles or like VR, I don't even I just kind of say, sorry, man, I don't want to waste anyone's time. I'm going to politely decline. And like Fernando says, it's not a personal thing, I think on Digital Dragon, I've declined probably 80% of meeting requests, because it's just not my thing, I'm really sorry, but it's just not my thing. So yeah.
Because you're saying strategy,
but you were never going to sign that.
No.
So getting a no straight off is great for that dev. because they were
yeah. So you saved them the time, right? They've eliminated an option, and they can focus in the right place potentially. Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. I think a quick no is much better than someone just leading someone down the garden path and wasting time, right? That doesn't help.
Yeah.
Okay, so that was like the preamble to set the scene of who we are, what we look for, and stuff. And now we're getting into the nitty gritty of actually, so what the panel's about, the do's and don'ts, right? World in lockdown, what's going on? So, is your day to day impacted? How is it different? I presume you're all working remotely. What's life like now that we're living in a world with a pandemic? Mitsu, do you want to go first?
Yeah, I think the major change I've certainly seen is that the pitch materials have been much more concise, much more defined. I think it's given everybody an opportunity to take stock of their projects and how they pitch, who they're pitching to. So generally speaking, the pitch materials has been better thought out, or there's certainly an expectation on publishers that developers should have these much better prepared and do their homework before they approach us. But in terms of like the volume and the content, like it's not, that hasn't really affected. We go through about 300 to 400 pitches each month, and that hasn't really changed. The only change I've seen is maybe when we are seeking out like platform deals with like, Stadia and EA, and Microsoft, they had a little, stutter maybe like March, April, when everything just stopped for a while, but since then, I think everything's back on track, really. Yeah.
Yeah. And you, Fernando?
I mean, I think from our side of things, and I'm talking really specifically about Modern Wolf. I mean, I think we miss the trade shows a lot. Trade shows aren't perfect, and they have a lot of problems. But the experience of, even in those little 30-minute windows you get at Digital Dragons or at Gamescom or at Reboot, where you're face-to-face with the devs, that is infinitely preferable to 10 VoIP calls. But that said, I mean, I think we have. It's funny. I think Mitsu's right. Like the quality of pitches, I think, has gone up, but at the same time, I think we have also gotten just kind of more patient with pitches. If you've got a 30-minute slot with me at Gamescom, I'm kind of expecting you to show up and have your shit together. Pardon my French, and give me a good pitch, right? Make the time work. We are definitely much less. Have lowered our expectations about that on video call pitches. There are technical problems every time. It's hard to make that human connection over video. It's hard to read the room, right? Because it's much more difficult for the devs to understand, to get feedback from me, those and my scouting team. And so we absolutely have, given people second slots and longer time, and gone back and revisited pitches that we normally, I think, would have probably missed, just to make sure we hadn't missed something, because it's tough, man. It's tough. There's a lot of stress for everybody right now, and we're trying to be as empathetic about that as we possibly can be. So, do your best, I think, to have your stuff together and be on time and know what, all the stuff we talked about before, like the stuff that Ryan was saying about researching who you're talking to, and do all of that stuff, but also know that everything sucks for us also, and we desperately want the world to go back to normal too. So you'll get a fair hearing from us these days.
Yeah, and Ryan, how's it different for you? Because you're representing studios, and so you can see a lot, right, in terms of from your position.
Yeah, I mean, so for us, biggest thing by far is inability to travel and get together in person, right? I mean, and whether that's like conferences or going on site to a developer or to a publisher visiting a developer to meet with them and do due diligence, just get to know them. And a lot of it is like, we're doing our best over video calls, and that's great. And, to the points that Mitsu and Fernando made, it's like, they're, we're doing pretty good with video calls, and I think publishers are very understanding of the situation across the board, regardless of the size of publisher. I think that's just a universal thing. But that ability to like meet in person and build rapport, and all of the things that happen outside of talking about the nuts and bolts of the opportunity aren't quite there the way that they used to be, and that makes it also very hard for new developers without that kind of track record, developers without the existing relationship with the publisher they're talking to, because it's a lot of it comes down to, as we've talked about, who's the team and are we confident that they can execute, even if we like the idea. And that piece of it, I think, is very, very impacted right now. But what I think a lot of developers are trying to do is to make sure that the pitch materials they have are very clear, that all of the written communication that needs to happen is clear. And we are seeing these multiple meetings and calls. So things are still happening. Publishers are still looking. One thing that we're seeing sort of, I would say, like universally across the board is slow down. Like things are just taking longer. And it's not out of any kind of lack of desire to move fast. It's just the practicality of, as Fernando was saying, it's like, what maybe used to be like one meeting in person at Gamescom and then a trip to a developer is now multiple Zoom calls spread out over a few weeks. And then we're still kind of only at the point where now we understand your concept, but we got to start doing more due diligence. So the whole process is really stretched out. And that's just something for developers to keep in mind, especially as they're thinking about things like their cash flow and how long it might take to close that deal. Even if a publisher is interested, we're just finding things taking longer these days.
No, you're so right. No, you're all right. And I think there's pros and cons in life with anything, right? And then with this lockdown, I think some of the advantages you've highlighted already for developers, but maybe another advantage of this situation that developers can take advantage of is the fact that there is no travel, right? So there's no travel budget they need to account for.
Yeah.
Developers can sign up to multiple of these online events, and it's leveled the playing field, right, in a way. So you don't need to have like this huge travel budget to go to GDC to be able to pitch to publishers. Now it's kind of everyone's on the same kind of, we're all in the same boat here. So I think that's a huge advantage to be able to, an opportunity to take advantage of for developers. But it's so true, it's taking so much longer to do stuff. Like my calendar is full of Zoom calls, right? Something I could have just walked over to someone to talk 10 seconds is now, okay, we're going to have a call. It's going to turn into a 15-minute conversation. It's like, right? So everything takes longer.
We're about to sign a game, and it has taken literally twice as long as every other signing process we've ever done. And a lot of that is exactly what you and Ryan were just saying, right? Like, it's stuff that in a face-to-face lunch would have been done in 2 hours, and it's just like 3 calls instead.
We have to work around it, right? So that's the massive thing that we need to take into account, that it is going to take longer. So maybe pitch earlier than you would have normally done, and just kind of test the waters and get on people's radar, start that relationship. Maybe that's the thing to kind of do. Okay, and then in terms of the minimum material you need to assess a pitch, what is it that is the minimum? Like at the very least, what do people need to show off? Maybe Mitsu, do you want to go first?
Yeah, I mean, we sign, games without a demo. It's always preferable to have a working demo. If not, the basic minimum is a pitch deck and a video. And we could obviously go into financial stuff later on, but a deck and a video is fine. If you don't even have a video, some developers make like a Rippermatic. They just get clips from other games or other YouTube films or whatever, put them together to explain, this is art style, this is the game, feel, etc., to convey what the game is. But it's a risk we take, but obviously, like Fernando, Regular Corporation has only been going since for 5 years this year. So we do have to kind of make sure that we do look for kind of undiscovered gems kind of thing. As part of that is taking risks. So yeah, I think demo working prototype is always preferable. In fact, some publishers I don't think would accept a pitch without one, right? I don't know about you, Fernando.
I mean, this will sound cruel, but it totally depends on who you are. And
I think that's fair,
right? Yeah, like if you've got some good games under your belt, if Subset Games knocked on my door and was like, "Here's a pitch for a game. We wrote it on the back of a Post-it 10 minutes ago, and we want $1 million," I'll be like, "Where do I sign, pal?" But if you don't have that track record, then I expect to see more, right? So if you're a new developer, if you haven't shipped anything before, or if you maybe shipped kind of 1 or 2 smaller projects, we definitely won't sign a game without a demo. And that doesn't mean don't get in touch, and that doesn't mean don't tell us what you're up to, because that game that I mentioned a few minutes ago that we just signed, we've been talking to that guy for a year. So absolutely, get in touch. But our expectations are going to be higher depending on what you deliver.
Completely.
Yeah, or they would need mitigating reasons, right? They don't have a working build, but they've got, for example, they've got 500,000 followers on Twitter, as an example.
Sure, that helps.
Or his name is Kojima. Yeah. I don't know, right? But they need to have.
Right, exactly. And it does depend on a kind of, I guess, how. It's also kind of like, it doesn't even need to be a full like vertical slice demo either. It just kind of needs to be a demo of the risky stuff, right? Like if you're proposing a unique gameplay mechanic, I want to see that. I want to play that mechanic, right? If you can't tell me, well, it's the turn-based combat of XCOM plus the dating of Hatoful Boyfriend, which somebody pitched me that. That sounds great. Show me the high-risk stuff, right? Show me the stuff that sounds like nobody's done it before, because that's the stuff you got to prove actually works.
Yeah, and I think that's the thing. It's like, when we think of answering those questions for a publisher, like, why should this game made? Why will people want it? Why are you the team to make it? The materials that you have should answer those questions. And sometimes you can answer those questions with a pitch deck because of your pedigree and because you're leaning on all the stuff that your team has done before. And there's less questions around your ability to execute. And there aren't any crazy, innovative, unproven mechanics that need to be, that are huge risks, to Fernando's point. But, when you're looking at like, do I need a prototype? And then what does a prototype have to have? It's a question of like, well, what will that answer for publishers? Like if you're a newer team, it needs to answer, well, this is our ability to execute. And if you're a really new team, it might need to be something close to a vertical slice to show the level of quality you can achieve. And if it's an unproven mechanic, it should show that mechanic. So I think it's like, it's always about asking yourself as a developer, like, what is this prototype meant to do? Like, what questions is it meant to answer for the publisher to make them confident in the idea and our ability to execute on it?
Completely. It's about proving credibility, right? And when you provide builds, definitely tell the person that you provided the build with the context of the build.
Yes.
Like, what's the purpose of this build, right? Because sometimes when it's out of context, like, I don't even know what I'm looking at, right? What is this, right? So having that context is super important. So yeah, it is. I think it's fair to say it depends. It does depend on the context. I mean, if Miyamoto came and pitched a paper pitch of I'm gonna do a platformer, I'm like, I'm signing it, right? But if anyone else came, I'd be like, well, I don't know yet.
Yeah.
Totally. And in what we do, I mean, we talk with all different publishers, and some of them are okay with paper pitches, and some of them need builds, and some of them it depends. And it's some of them will actually fund prototypes if they like the paper pitch. So it's about knowing like who you're approaching, who you're pitching to, what they're looking for, and what materials you need for them.
Okay, so we're 40 minutes into the panel now, and I'm finally going to ask a question that's directly related to the title of the panel. So it's the do's and don'ts, right,
Oh,
of
wow.
what to do in a world in lockdown. And this question is about the do. So what would you say is the best practice for a developer that's pitching in to get investment? What is the best practice right now, considering the world that we're living in now? What kind of things should they take advantage of or leverage? What's the opportunity on the table? How can they best secure investment right now? Maybe Ryan, do you want to go first?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of it's some of the stuff that we've touched on right now. So it's about, knowing, like having those pitch materials ready, knowing what your game is, knowing who the right partners are to approach, and making sure to tailor your materials to them. Obviously we've talked about sort of the one of the harder things is that without having a lot of these in-person events, it's about then you have that stuff. How do you get it in front of the right people? But again, I think that's where a lot of publishers are using things like social media, their networks, and people should be leaning on their networks as well as using online conferences such as this to get in touch with people. But again, I think it's about like we've talked about. Everyone is wall-to-wall Zoom calls these days. Everyone is super busy because everything's taking so much longer as well. So it's about being very clear about, here's why I want to talk to you. Here's why I think this is a good fit. And then when you do get on those calls, really being able to clearly articulate what it is you're making, why you're making it, why this person should be interested in this idea. So having those materials ready, having a good tech setup and being ready for Zoom calls, everything you can do to sort of be professional, and consider this, like if you were in an in-person meeting with this publisher, would you do the things that you're doing on that Zoom call? Would you be dressed that way and present yourself that way? So thinking of the new way of communicating, which is a lot more sort of, this sort of distance video calls and written form, and making sure that your communication is very clear on all those fronts.
Fernando, that's great advice, by the way. So many good bits of nuggets of information there. Fernando, anyway, go for it.
Yeah, I think a lot of that is all of that is bang on. I think, Bobby, what you were saying earlier about the fact that all of these shows are now virtual, which has kind of lowered the barrier to attending them. I mean, that is a great thing, right? And as much as I think all of us kind of miss the show circuit, it is hard. It is hard to if you're a small business, if you're a new business. It's hard to scrape that money together sometimes to travel to the show. So definitely take advantage of kind of the flattening of it. I'd be really surprised if 2021 was just straight up back to normal. So there's plenty of time still to, I think, kind of take advantage of this situation. One other thing I would say is, it's kind of two sides of a coin, really. It's be persistent and be patient. Like Mitsu said, the pace of pitches coming in our door has not slowed down. If anything, towards the end of the summer, it started to pick up. We are seeing a lot of pitches. Just the day-to-day business of life has gotten more complex. At Modern Wolf, we prided ourselves on being, because a lot of us are former devs and former indie devs, we prided ourselves on being the publisher that got back to everybody. If you sent us a pitch, we got back to you every single time, even if it was a 2-sentence email that was just like, sorry, man, it's not for us. We're still doing that, but we are not as quick as we used to be about it, because the day-to-day business is just tougher to operate now, and the number of pitches just hasn't really slowed down. And so, but we will, if you pitch a publisher and you don't hear from them in a week or 10 days, ping them again, right? And don't be shirty about it. Everybody's doing the best they can right now, but definitely be persistent. Don't leave it at one email. Follow up with people. Do your best to raise your profile, and if you've done all the stuff that we've been talking about up until this point on the panel, doing your homework about who you're talking to, making sure that you understand how your pitch works and why it works, you know, stay on top of people as well, right? Do all of that stuff, and it'll benefit
Nice
you
one.
tremendously.
Mitsu, best practices.
I think in this kind of new COVID, new normal days, I think having the pitch materials really snap. I really like short pitches that I can just read through and really understand what the game is, what the key selling points are. So I think that's really, really important. If you can't convince biz dev guys, in your first 5 minutes of discussion, then I don't think you haven't caught my interest, and I don't think that's going to end up well, right? So I think it's really important for developers to understand how to make your pitch attractive. There's no point saying to me, my unique selling point is, something woolly, something very vague, like gameplay, and not really being able to correlate, or, I've got a great art style. Art style on its own don't necessarily sell the game. You need to have something, right? So I think it's a very, very difficult thing to do. But I think that needs refining, even, speaking to your family or your colleagues about pitching it informally and saying, is my pitch interesting? Is it sexy? Does it catch your attention? Really clear, concise. That's kind of a big thing for me right now. But the other side of the thing that I really like to see developers is to do your homework. It's like, there's no point coming to me and saying, I can make a better shooter than Call of Duty for $500,000. I don't buy that. I don't really buy that, right? So it's like understanding that if you're going to go into the FPS market, you really need to be doing something very unique, different, or you have a very extremely large budget, right? So you need to know where you're going, who you're trying to appeal, who the competition is. When I used to work at Sony, we have Sony IPs, right? And people would pitch, they would say to me, I've got this great driving simulator. And we're like, well, do you know that, Sony's got Gran Turismo, right? And they're like, oh, I didn't think of that. So I think doing your homework is really, really important, because that gives publishers the confidence that you know what you're doing and you know what you want to make. Yeah.
Yeah. And actually, Mitsu, that reminds me of something tangential to that. I'm in this business because I freaking love indie games, man, and I play everything. And I definitely expect, right, if you're going to pitch me something, I expect you to know your kind of competitive space.
Completely agree.
Right? So I got pitched a city builder last year. It seemed pretty cool at first, and the more I played it, the more it sort of fell into a lot of pitfalls that earlier city builders had solved. And I talked to the dev, and I was like, have you played? I won't say specifics, because I don't want to name and shame this guy, but have you played other city builders in the genre? And the guy was like, no, not really. And to me, that just basically was kind of a tick box right there, this, right?
Because I think whether it's gameplay or whether it's the overall package, there are known, I call them kind of like genre leaders. There are benchmark games, right? Like Bobby, you guys signed 2 Point Hospital. For me, that is one of the genre leaders in your space, right? So I think unless you understand who you're competing against and why 2 Point Hospital did fantastic, commercially and critically, you're never going to convince publishers, right? Because publishers will be asking these very difficult questions to say, why should I buy your game? Why is your game better than this game? And I think, that's an easy question to do some research and, have these questions, answers prepared, because, I think most publishers would be asking similar questions on that front, I think.
Yeah, so for me, it's totally that, right? Being a subject matter expert, right? Knowing your space. in your pitch deck, there should be a competitor slide, and you should know where your game is positioned within that space, and you should know everything. Like, you should have played all those games at least, right? And could talk to it at least better than any of us, because you're living and breathing that thing, right?
Yep.
And we want to believe that you are the team that we can get behind. So yeah, I couldn't agree more about being a subject matter expert. Also, maybe best practices, I would say, maybe it's worthwhile having a pitch deck for investors if you want equity or M&A kind of discussions, a pitch deck for project investment. Maybe there's the initial pitch deck that you send, that's like the short version, the 1-pager or 3-pager, and then maybe there's a more detailed one when you get into the discussion once that person that you're engaging with shows interest. Because sending like a 100-page document is like, no, please don't do that on day one, right?
Totally.
No. And there's also going to be, you know, if you're pitching investors, a lot of investors are not games people. And they're looking at this as a purely commercial proposition. And one of the things you should have in your investment deck is, here's how much money I think this game's going to make. And personally, that is as a publisher, that is my pet peeve, right? If you have a slide that tells me how many units you're going to sell, I'm like, buddy, I can estimate sales better than you, I promise. So don't put that in your deck,
different
right?
decks, right?
So there's
totally.
That's definitely
totally. I mean, a deck is a tool to communicate something, and so you got to ask yourself, like, what am I trying to communicate? And is it I'm just trying to get the initial idea across to start a conversation, or we've had that, now here's my leave behind deck with a bunch of detail that someone could read through. I'm not going to walk through this. And an investor deck, totally different purpose. Should have totally different information in it.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah. And because we're not together in person in a physical space, I think you do have to account for the fact that they're maybe going to have to read it in their own time, right? And so there's that detailed, there should be a detailed one that is for reading, but it's not the initial one you send, right? Because then that might turn people off. Okay, let's talk about the don'ts. We've got 8 minutes left, and I don't see any questions coming in. So let's just do the don'ts, and then maybe that'll be enough time, or that'll be just about enough time to finish the panel. So what are the things people should avoid doing? Like, they definitely don't do this. Like, if you do this, you're going to turn me off. You're going to turn anyone else off, especially in this world in lockdown. Definitely avoid, right? Who wants to take first? Go first with it.
I mean, I'll tell you one definite avoid for me, right? Is I get a lot of pitches that, well, I wouldn't say a lot, but I see some pitches, right, that just kind of don't. It's kind of tangential to what we were talking about before. Like, don't really understand why somebody would buy this game versus the current sort of market leader, right? Like, and this doesn't have to be perfect, right? Because if we like the game and we like the pitch, we're going to help you figure this stuff out, right? And anybody on this panel will do the same. But kind of one of my pet peeves is just not understanding why the game stands out from the competitive set, right? And to understand that, you do need to do what we were just talking about. You need to play everything in your competitive space. You need to play all of these related games to yours, and you need to be able to articulate, like Mitsu was saying, 2 Point Hospital is without a doubt the king of sort of isometric management, right? And there we go. There's that BBC interview moment we were waiting for.
It could have been any one of us.
It could have been any one of us. It could have been any of us. It could have been any one of us. But yeah, the not knowing what your competitors do and not being able to identify, right? 2 Point Hospital, right? Irregular Corp would have signed it. Modern Wolf would have signed it, right? It's perfect for any of our catalogs. It's super replayable. People are still playing it. Thousands of people are playing 2 Point Hospital probably right now if we loaded up Steam and looked. So if you're going to pitch us an isometric hospital management sim, you better know why people are going to drop 2 Point Hospital and play it instead. And ideally, you ought to be able to identify, here's a couple of things the 2 Point Hospital doesn't do. that our game does. And if you know that about your game, then good on you. And if you don't know that, I'm going to have to help you figure that out. And that's so sometimes, like Mitsu was saying, he's got 300 pitches in his inbox. He's going to gravitate naturally towards the ones that make immediate sense to him. And we all do that. So if you can do that, you'll have a much better chance of success.
Brian?
Yeah, for me, sorry,
Mitsu.
Ryan, go ahead.
Oh, sure. So yeah, I mean, I would say, don't forget about the importance of the materials that you need to sell your idea. So, you have the great idea, maybe you've even started working on a prototype, but don't forget about all of the details that need to be there to actually get that first conversation and then to carry it forward and to hopefully work with a publisher to get your game made. So, a lot of the times we see sort of, decks come together and it's sort of a one size fits all. Well, I'll create this one deck and I'll just send it to everyone. And the problem is then it's when people look at it, it doesn't resonate with what their company is doing and what their company is looking for. And if you can take that bit of extra time to say, here's the game, here's the team, here's why we're doing it, here's why it is the right fit for you, and you actually can even put that in your materials and really communicate that. Same thing with the email that you send, right? To send that deck in the first place, like personalize it a little bit, show that you've done some research, show that you think this is a conversation that publisher should take the time to have because they're so busy. And so I would say, like, don't take the shortcuts on the things that go around your game that you need in order to actually sell your game so that it can get made and hit the market. So those shortcuts can kill you. And sometimes it's a shame because I'll see developers that have put so much time and effort and they're like 95% of the way there, but that last 5% that they're missing is probably going to prevent them from getting a deal, because it's a critical 5% to have. And it's the 5% that's going to distinguish them from all the other pitches these publishers are seeing. So I would say, definitely that's something that I would look at.
Nice one.
Yeah, for me, the ones I dislike is when we, obviously I like to work with team who believes in their project and they're very passionate, because passion is very, very infectious and able to go the extra mile to overcome any shortfalls. But I don't really like teams that straight off just start talking about like rev shares, and they don't really appreciate what publishers bring to the table and could help them deliver. Basically, we're dealing in people's dreams, right? And the first thing they ask is like, what's my revenue share going to be? And that just kind of breaks it for me. I think financial things could be dealt with, later on, that is fair for everyone. But before they do that, I think they need to understand what each party brings to the table, and it kind of makes sense. So that's kind of like my pet hate amongst all this. Hey, Bobby, we've got a question. We have a question. From in the Q&A tab.
Oh, do we?
From Joe. I'll read it.
Should acquisition be the end game
yeah.
of indie game developers? Is that the only way to grow? For Searchlight, yes. That is the end game. That's our end game. But I don't think that's your end game, right? I think some people, it's like they're really successful. They remain indie. They love being indie, and I think that's perfect. Like, people have different goals, right? Like, sometimes it's a financial thing, sometimes it's a creative thing, or maybe it's about the quality time they spend with friends and family. I think everyone has really different goals. So I think it depends what your goal in life is.
Yeah. It's also about, do you want to have a boss again? Because that's ultimately the question, right? If you have investors, you have a boss, right? And even if your title says CEO, you've got a boss. So if you're okay with having a boss, then acquisition is not a bad choice for you. If the buck needs to stop with you all the time, you probably shouldn't sell. Or if you do sell, then you should leave.
Yeah, and I think it's also important that people understand the difference between publishers, VCs, equity investors, they all bring different things to the table, and there's also different obligations, right? Investors would want to have an exit. I'm using technical words here, Ryan, help me out. But some publishers would just work on a single project basis. Some publishers like SEGA are looking at much more long term, successful game, successful franchise, merger and acquisition, so I think different flavors, different, publishers. So yeah, I think it's very important that everybody understands that, their goals match with publishers' goals, or else it's going to end not very nice.
Yeah,
okay, I'm just
for
conscious
sure.
that the timer has gone into the minus, and we're running over at the moment. I don't know if everyone can see the timer, so I guess we should wrap up soon. But do you want to say a last word, Ryan, before we go?
Yeah, I was just going to say, it's not the only way to grow, right? So that's kind of the second part of the question. I mean, one of our clients, Behavior, is the biggest indie developer in Canada, over 600 people. So you can certainly grow by making your own successful games, doing work for hire, that kind of stuff. So it's certainly not the only way to grow. And I think that to your point, Bobby, I mean, as an indie developer, you just have to consider, why are you doing it? If you're doing it because it's your passion and you want to make games and you want to continue to make the games you want to make, then acquisition probably isn't necessarily the right end game to aim for. Maybe it happens. But so it's really a personal decision, but it's certainly not the only path to grow.
Yeah, and there's different kind of, what does grow mean? Does it mean studio headcount? Does it mean the amount of content you deliver? Does it mean the quality or scope of content you deliver? There's loads of ways to slice it, right? So yeah, I think it is a very personal question, and you have to ask yourself, and really investigate what are the pros and cons, and what does it mean, right? Because when maybe an acquisition by Sega is really cool, but an acquisition by someone else isn't, right? But you need to find out what the nuances are, what the differences are. So I think it's down to the individual. Right. So we're overrunning, so we'll call it. I think it's been awesome. You guys have been brilliant. Thank you so much for all the knowledge, nuggets of information. Hopefully it's useful for everyone watching. Stay safe out there, everyone. Hope to speak to you all at some point in person. Thank you very much.
Yep.
Yes. Thanks so much, Bobby. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Bobby. Thanks, guys.
We have a countdown. 4, 3, 2, 1.
Happy New Year.